everybody. This is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist BrownMark. For those of you that don't remember BrownMark, or maybe don't know, like, who is BrownMark? BrownMark is the bassist for the Revoultion, and they've got a tour coming up after decades of not touring. We'll come back and talk about that. But thanks for taking time to talk to us, BrownMark. Tell us a little bit about your beginning, your bass journey. How did you get started?
I have a funny story about how I started playing bass because I actually started on guitar when I was about 7 years old. Mm-hmm. And I bought a 6-string Telecaster. It was a Sears version, so it was a cheap guitar. And I was so excited to get it out of the box, I snapped the 2 top strings off of it with the scissors, through the box when I was cutting it open. Oh. And so I only had 4 strings, and I didn't know the difference between a bass and a guitar at the time. I was 6, 7 years old. So all I had was 4 strings, and that's how I learned how to play guitar. It was, kind of like a bass on guitar. And I would always hear bass lines on songs first. So I gravitated more towards bass, but I had a guitar. So when I got into my teens, I started realizing that, there's a lot of other real guitars out there called basses. And that's when I started exploring, the difference between the two, because I was kind of like the type of musician where, I had a desire to do it, but, I wasn't really into it. Yeah, Mom helped me get the guitar, and so I played it, got bored with it, moved on. Years later, I meet this guy that in high school that had a real bass. He had a G&L. That's before it wasn't the Music Man. I forget what model it was, but it was a G&L. He had some GHS round wound strings on it. I'd never even heard of this stuff before. And I think I was about 13 or 14. And I was I 14? I don't remember. But I remember I was a sophomore in high school. And I was blown away by the sound of it. And that's when I started actually picking it back up. So I'm about 14 years old. And I immediately said, oh, man, I gotta get me one of these. And I ended up with a Kingston bass from a pawn shop. had action about this high with a bow and arrow, but again, that's all I could afford. But it actually really taught me more technique because I had to work harder to get the sound that I needed. And I like to play funk, so it's kind of hard playing funk on action that high. Yeah, and then I ended up getting a J.C. Penney. I think it was a J.C. Penney's bass. It was a imitation jazz, Fender Jazz. Yeah, or no, Precision.
Okay.
It was Precision, and cheap, raggedy. I mean, it was just after about a year, the neck started to warp, and so by the time I was 15, I was actually learning that there's quality in instruments. And that time I saved my money and I actually got an Ibanez. And it was a pretty decent bass. I spent about, at the time, $400 something for it. And
wow.
It was a nice bass. I actually liked it. It had a preamp in it. I didn't know what that was and started learning. But yeah, that's how I started playing bass.
Gotcha. And then how did you continue to develop from there? Playing with bands or decide to go to school?
That's the first thing that I did. I was in the music room like every day. Mr. Hamilton was my music teacher at Central High School in Minneapolis. He was Prince's teacher. He was Jimmy Jam and Terry's teacher. I mean, he was everybody's music teacher because we all came through the same circuit. And so, I mean, he would give me straight A's because, I couldn't read very well, but I could play everything he'd throw in front of me. It didn't matter because I could hear. I had an ear for music. So it didn't matter what composition he'd put in front of me with the big orchestra behind us and everything. I could just lock right in. And so he didn't want to fail me because I couldn't read. And so he passed me. I would get straight A's, but I failed all my other classes.
Oh.
I lived in the music room. I skipped school all the time, and I would hide in. We had soundproof booths in the music room, and I would just hide in there. I'd play guitar all day long, and it got to a point where I said, okay, enough of summer school. I got to get serious here. But I always played in bands though, because I realized that reading music and in the theory behind the music, I understood the theory. Reading music, I felt like it started limiting my creativity, which for some people I've heard that, and for other people they say no, you gotta know how to read. Quiet as kept, Prince didn't know how to read. Me and Prince used to laugh about that because we could not read music. And I think in later years he started, developing the skill to learn to read. But early in the earlier years, neither one of us could read. And I found that playing with a bunch of different people in different bands, that was the key to developing many different skills and many different styles. And so that's what I did. I played from the time I was 14, 15 years old. I played with so many different people. And I was able to play with so many different bass players, and I would pick up on their techniques instantly. Yes. You hear my dog. Yeah.
There we go. So, and from there, it's always interesting because when it comes to music, a lot of times we look at music like a language. And if you think about how humans learn languages, we learn to talk before we learn to read.
Yeah.
And I think music a lot of times can be the same way, although sometimes they'll try to turn it the other way around and say, okay, you gotta know how to read. Now, people that speak, it's great when they learn how to read, the language, because it opens them up to other things. But I agree. I think a lot of great music has even wasn't written. And I know that there was a whole period of jazz, especially we're talking Cotton Club, some of that old stuff. It was not written. Those arrangements were all up here, and they were tight arrangements. So it wasn't any just three chords and just kind of wing it there. It was some very precise things.
Exactly.
But it didn't. They never formalized. And to this day, I know a bassist who he's a teacher, and he used to play with the Bill Evans trio. And one of his life missions has been transcribing that old jazz, because at the time nobody wrote it down. And so he's been working at trying to save that so that in the future somebody can look and go, okay, this is how this is written out. But let's go on to your journey. So playing with bands, playing by ear, high school, what happened next?
I've been working, I grew up in a family. We didn't have a lot of money, so I started working when I was about 7 years old. And so, paper routes to, working dishwasher, and then became a cook in a restaurant. And then, I worked the circuit. And Prince, I bump into him frequently. And I knew who he was, but he didn't know who I was. And he was in a band called Grand Central Station, and I knew he was coming out with an album. And he came out with that Soft and Wet album when I was working as a cook in a restaurant, and he was dating the waitress. And her name was Kim Upshur. And I remember he came into the restaurant, and she came running to the back, and she's like, oh my God, you got to cook this food. You got to do it right. And, so I made him pancakes, to make a long story short. And I've told that story a million times. And because now it's funny, Prince cooks people pancakes, but that was my first encounter with him, actual encounter. And then about, I would say 2.5, 3 years later, I end up being, he calls me up for an audition for his band. And because I had made a name for myself in town by playing with so many different people. And then he would come and watch the band I was in currently named Fantasy. and he would come and watch us. And so he called me up and he said, I want you to audition for my band. Make a long story short again, about a month later when we're in rehearsal, I just stopped and I looked at him. I said, do you remember back at this restaurant where you came in, you were dating Kim? He said, oh, I remember that restaurant. And I said, yeah, I remember this kid, this little beanhead kid in the back with a big afro jumping up and down, trying to look and see who you were. He said, don't tell me that was you. I said, that was me. And the whole band, everybody hit the floor and started laughing because it was the funniest thing in the world. But 360, you know, small world, you know, how everything just came back around. And here I am admiring him, and then I end up being in his band playing bass. And he chose me. I had heard he had auditioned somewhat 400 bass players. Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, I felt like, you know, why me? You know, how come you picked me? But I think it's because, again, I go back to my theory of the more people you play with, the more seasoned you become, and the more broad your style becomes. So I mean, I can like sit in with any type of music style, and I just boom, I can lock right in. But I still have my own style, and Prince liked my style because it was a lot like his style. And then when I got in the band with him, oh man, I mean, that really molded, because we would do like this double bass thing all the time. Like, we'd have these 3-4 hour jam sessions, and he would grab the bass guitar. And I mean, he's a phenomenal bass player. Yeah. I had to do that. So he and we would go bam, bam, bam. And, you know, he really liked, because I have this Larry Graham type of bottom end, but I have like a Louis Johnson type of a slap. A lot of my riffing, I don't know if you remember the bass player from the group Slave.
Rings a bell.
Mr. Marks, and then there's Bernie White from Earth, Wind, Fire.
Of course.
Yeah. So I adopted all these different styles, and then I kind of meshed them into my own. So I play a combination of all these different styles. And yeah, Prince kind of liked that. So I became his core bass player for many years. So nice.
Yeah. And as time progressed, because I know there were some very active years back in the day, and then there was, you know, kind of a spell where there was a lot less going on. What happened next?
You mean like when back pre-Purple Rain or post-Purple Rain?
I'd say maybe post-Purple Rain, because I know that things were pretty busy, and you were involved with Purple Rain.
Yes. Well, what happens is, you know, you reach a pinnacle. You know, you reach you know, I call it the summit. You know, you reach the mountain peak, and where do you go from there? You know, and that's what happened to the whole band, the Revoultion, with Prince. It's like we reached this pinnacle of success where we were to a point where, like, we were saying to ourselves, wow, what do we do now? And Prince, you know, he was already on 2 albums down the road. You know, he's thinking about the next movie, and we haven't even finished the Purple Rain tour yet, you know. And how we would write together, we would have the next album almost completed material-wise before we even anticipated the production in the studio. Gotcha. Because we carried sound equipment with us on the road. So there was always a sound truck. And so we would do like 2-hour sound checks before the shows, and that's all we would do is jam. I mean, we would jam. Somebody had an idea or a groove. I mean, that was the time to bring it forward. And then we would all work on that. And then he'd put it, you know, 2-inch reel right in the truck. The sound truck would capture it. And then he'd come back the next day. He's like, oh, check this out. And he'd have some words on it, and he'd, you know, have some vocals. And we were like, oh, yeah, let's work on this. And so that's kind of how it went. But it got to a point where, you know, we were like, wow, where do we go now? I mean, we've hit so big, you know, we didn't know where to take it. And I think Prince started leaning more towards maybe I need to be a solo artist again. Maybe I need to go back to just being me. I know that's where I was. I played with him at that point. It was, man, I was with him 6-7 years. I was like, okay, it's time for me to find something different to do.
Sure.
Because I like to produce, and I formed a group called Maserati. There was I had a girls group called Mercedes. I got a record deal with Motown. I started producing some of their artists, Atlantic Records, Warner Brothers Records. So I started getting more into the production side of the business.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of where it took me away from the Revoultion. And I told Prince it was time for me to go. And so he at that point disbanded the whole thing. And I think he was ready to do that anyways.
Sure.
And, and that's when he started the Sign of the Times album. Yeah. Which was funny because we were on a lot of that stuff from years prior.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So. But that's kind of how things slowed down as far as the Prince, the Revoultion group. And then, he started doing stuff like taking the bass out of the music. I don't know if you remember that. Like Doves Cry. And,
yeah.
Kiss, I co-wrote that with Prince. That was actually for my group Maserati. And he liked it so much, it ended up on his album. But he took the bass out. That's what he was doing. But I think he had a feeling that just watching where I was headed, I think he knew I wasn't going to be around much longer. And so I have a feeling that's why he started taking the bass out of the music. That's just my opinion, but,
Sure.
Just seems kind of weird that he started popping the bass out of the music. I thought that was kind of strange. But who knows?
There you go. So you end up kind of going on your own. You're doing production. I'm catching a car theme there, but with Mercedes and Maserati.
Yeah. I was into cars, back then. It was like, hot car, fast cars. I mean, whoa, that's perfect names for bands,
Yeah.
I had Mercedes. They were supposed to be the girls of Maserati. Mm-hmm. And Maserati was actually a hot group, man. They were taking off. They even Prince recognized them. He wrote a couple songs for them, and they charted. And, they went on tour. They opened for us in Cobo Hall, Detroit. They were on tour for about 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, and so they did pretty good. But drugs, what do they call it? Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Oh, that substance abuse will get you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and especially nowadays, that those of us have lived through all of those times. Mm-hmm. And you see some musicians that are still around. Those are the ones that kind of made the choices and said, it's not for me, and that's why you still see them playing. Yeah. They're still doing their thing because you can only burn your candle so much before you got nothing left. And
yeah, that's the way I was. I got to a point where I understand where it comes from, because the road life, a lot of people that they think it's all fun and game, mm-hmm. but road life can be hard. You get lonely very quickly.
Yeah.
And your friend becomes the bottle or the substance,
mm-hmm.
and next thing you know, that covers over the empty spaces, the empty voids. And because I became an alcoholic, and I realized, because I have a very tight-knit family, that I needed to make some changes. I have to change. And with the help of my family, I was able to, clean myself up and dry out completely, because I don't even touch alcohol anymore. If I have a drink, it's like, gosh, once every blue moon,
Yeah.
But I had to do that because, substance abuse and that business do not mix. No way.
It has effects, and I think also when you look back at the 60s and the 70s, a lot of the music that kind of felt like it it was an accepted thing. It was like, it's trippy music, or it's psychedelic music, or it's got to have, some of that in it. And the reality is, I think a lot of music actually suffered. When you go back and you listen to it now, you go, oh man, that was just random. I don't know what was going on. And of course, we could probably talk a lot longer about like Hendrix music and stuff like this, that you just kind of going, oh, what if we'd still have the opportunity to listen to some of these musicians. But great that you had made some good choices. You've moved forward. You've been producing. What happened next? Bring us up to date. The Revoultion's got back together.
Yeah. So I got a big deal with Motown, and I stayed with them a few years. Kind of got out of the touring, got out of the live performance industry, basically, and then I got really unhappy because the music industry was changing rapidly. I don't know if you remember the change from the 80s to the 90s, but it was drastic. Then this new underworld, this undertone of music started to rise, this hip hop, and it started to really take a grip on the industry, a powerful grip. And, what that did to the playing musician was, that really took us out for a while there. And it was cheaper for a promoter to have somebody spin a record than to bring in a band, So the industry changed for us. Even as a producer, everything started to change for me. And so I decided to retire. So I retired from the industry in 1992. A lot of people don't realize that, but I left the industry completely, and I went back to college. And I got a degree in engineering, audio engineering.
Okay.
And I learned how to become an audio engineer. I learned electronics. I learned computer science. So, because I wanted to get behind the scenes and do something different. I called myself wanting to be normal. Let me try to be normal, and it didn't last. 2 babies came along. I had 2 kids. I got married, had 2 kids, and so I decided to stay low until they got old enough, because I didn't want to get back in the music industry and then be away from them all the time. And I knew how taxing that life was. So I raised them. When they turned about 18, 19, I started going back into the studio. So it's a few years back now. I started working on another album, and an experimental album. It was an alternative rock album. It was, I called it 6 Mil Breach. And even going back a couple years, even before then, I did an album called Cryptic, which was, again, another experiment album, because I didn't know where I was. Where do I fit in now in this new age of music? Because now we're looking at, I think it was maybe 1999, 2000, somewhere. I didn't really know where I fit in. And so I started to just go in the studio and try different things. So this last project that I was working on about 2 years ago now was more, I got back to my funk roots, and it was more bass oriented, because with music, with synth bass and all that, you start getting away from really playing. And I said I wanted to get back to what people knew me as, a bass player, and really playing my bass. And so started working on this funk album. And then, Prince passes away last year, So that changed everything for me, because I got really depressed. And the Revoultion, we had always been together, but at that point we got really close, because we were spread all over the country. I lived, San Francisco. Wendy and Lisa lived in LA. Bobby and Matt lived in Minnesota. But when he passed away, we kind of all merged together, and since then we kind of stuck together like glue, because we didn't know what to do. And as a family, man, we love each other dearly, and so it's like we're all depressed, we're grieving. We're even talking about therapy, because it really hit us hard because Prince was like a family member. So it was a roller coaster of emotions. We had our good times, we had our bad, arguments, fights, you name it. We went through all of that. But for him to leave us and so much was unresolved, it just destroyed us. It was like, wow, he's gone. And so we decided we got to play. We have to play. And because we saw how the fans were grieving too. And I'm glad we did, because it helped me heal. Mm-hmm. Not only did it help me heal, it opened me up to a different type of creativity, So now I'm back in the studio and I'm writing again. But now it's not just this bass funk album. Now it's more, I can't even explain it, but it's very, very Princey. I'm going back to my Minnesota roots.
Nice.
And it's interesting how that happened. But I think that all his energy, just to be able to absorb some of that, where he left off, really helped me. I think Prince, it was almost like he tapped me on the shoulder and he says, Mark, take it back, and do what you do, mm-hmm. and give that to the people. And so that's where I'm at with my personal recording career. I'm back in the studio working on my own album, and with the Revoultion, oh man, that's just beautiful because we're able to give back the music that we helped Prince create in the 80s that everyone loved so much. Now we're authentic, so we're able to go out and play and give that music back to the fans, and it serves as like a healing to them too, because it's like a celebration of Prince's music, his life, but then also his death. And we can do it in a way that is, it just brings a level of comfort to people because it's real. We're not a tribute band. We're not somebody who got together and just said, "Oh, let's play some Prince music." No, mm-hmm. We help create that stuff. So it is in us. It is what we are. So when we play it for people, it has a weird effect. I don't know if you got to see any of our concerts, but everybody in the audience sings. It's the craziest thing in the world. It's like a huge party 1 second. Next thing you know, you hear the cries and the tears, and then you hear the laughter. And so it's a roller coaster of emotions throughout the night. And it's an awesome feeling for us.
Gotcha. Well, and here's among good things and bad things, I would be going to, because of your upcoming tour, you're coming through where we are, which is you're going to be in Portland, Oregon.
Yeah.
Coming up. But it just happens to be on a date that I get to meet my first and only grandson.
Oh, wow.
So
wow.
All of that was planned and in the works, and I'm going, I would love to see the show, but I got to meet a grandbaby.
Totally understand.
And so family, I totally get that. This is going to have to take precedent. But that's why we're talking now, because this is important stuff. Otherwise, I would be there with my microphone and my camera. We'd be talking there. But this is great. So tell us about the tour, you guys. What's the plan? I know it's April to July.
Well, what we've embarked on is a way of life more than just a tour. I mean, mm-hmm. we don't plan on stopping, unless there are elements out there that will force us to stop, but we don't foresee that. And for us, it's our ability to give back to the fans. Prince has millions of fans worldwide. Mm-hmm. And we hold a gift that we were able to create with him that we want to share, and that's the purpose of us doing this. Because like I said earlier, it helps people heal. It helps people get through the loss of him. So what we're doing now is we're going through this process of figuring it out. like we went through this first leg of the tour and we learned what we can't do because it's very expensive to tour.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things we had to adjust for this second leg. So now when we go out this time, we leave next Tuesday,
okay.
Second leg, and we're going to do it a little differently from a financial standpoint, so that we can survive. But it's the experience itself has been awesome, and we've gotten really great reviews from all the critics, and most importantly, the fans love it. And when I say they love it, if I don't know when we're going to roll in your neck of the woods again, but you be my guest. You come and
you bet.
Yeah, and you'll experience exactly what I'm talking about. It's surreal. It's like the only person missing is Prince.
Wow.
And the energy and the excitement, everything is there. He's the only thing missing, but that's the whole purpose of the celebration, And so it's almost like the spirit of Prince and his music lives on, and it turns into a wild party. We have a pretty good time on stage with it, So.
Very cool. Well, and I think a big part of it too is that music is one thing for musicians, but music is something for a lot of non-musicians as well. Exactly. And a lot of times I'll use the phrase a soundtrack to our life.
Yeah. And
there's those landmark moments in our life that there's a song or there was something happening, and you're going, okay, this song is for me. This is what's going on. Back in the day, my dad had a little yellow Volkswagen station wagon that had an 8-track player in it. And that was the greatest thing since sliced bread, because it had an 8-track player, and I only owned like 2 8-tracks, and one of them was Earth, Wind, and Fire. So anytime I could borrow that little station wagon, I get out and I got Boogie Wonderland as I'm just going down the street, and it was just like, okay, that's my driving music, man. That's what I got to hear when I'm doing this. And it's true for so many of these things, and I think it's one of the gifts that musicians receive in a certain way of immortality, because even after their passing, this offering that they're giving us endures and it lives on. Okay. And you think to like Bach and Beethoven and all these people, they're very alive with us because of the music, if nothing else. So it's an amazing and fabulous thing that you guys can pick up the torch and carry on, and I think it's just stupendous for both the musicians and the non-musicians to be able to go through the process of healing, because also I think in our culture, and I say that as an American, we don't focus a lot of attention on how to grieve passing. I mean, it's kind of like you just get over it, move on and do stuff. And some other cultures in the world will have more of a ceremony, or they'll have more of something that helps people kind of get through it, but we tend not to, and I think a lot of times we kind of pull into ourselves, and that's more self-destructive. So being out and sharing with people that common experience, that common music is incredibly valuable and incredibly important. And I definitely, you bet, any way I possibly can hear you guys play, we'll make sure that happens, because I want to experience that too, Yeah. So in addition to the touring, do you have any upcoming projects or anything going on?
Right now, like I said, I'm working on an album, but it's not going to come out anytime soon. Hopefully by the end of the summer, I'm going to release a single though, but I'm actually going to give it away.
Nice.
Just to, music industry is different now, and it's not always about money. To me, it's more about a fan base and developing that, So I'm going to give it away. And then as far as the tour, we have a break in August. We play, I think Connecticut's our last show on this leg of the tour. Mm-hmm. Then we're going to take about a month off, and then come back out sometime in September. and hit the Southeast, and then we're planning Europe right now. I know we're getting a lot of calls in Europe and Australia, so we'll see what happens with that and for 2018. And so it looks like it's going to be a long trek. It's not anything that's just going to end anytime soon. So
good to know. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, because us bass players always love our gear.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you're playing on. What do you got going on?
Okay. You know what? It's been a struggle trying to find the right amp, because I play. My style is very, like I said, I don't know if you're familiar with Larry Graham's playing.
Oh yeah.
But very, very hard slap. Now I play like that, but I have this rumbling that I put underneath it. I play almost percussion on the bass while I play it.
Mm-hmm.
So you hear this rumbling rhythm underneath the parts. And so I needed a bass that could get me the deep tones, and a bass amp that could give me those tones.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting, because I found the Gallium amp, and a lot of people are like, that's a rock amp, but how are you playing that? Well, it's because if you take those 410s, and I use the RBH system,
mm-hmm.
and if you take those 410, I got two 410 cabs, and when you bi-amp those, oh man, it's sick. And then I don't use the 15s on the bottom, I use sub cabs, 18s. Nice. And so my rig is pretty sick. Sometimes the soundman in front of the house, they ask me to turn it down because it's loud. And with the Revoultion, I have to play sometimes with half the rig because the venues are small.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my rig of choice. It's the Gallium Kruger RBH series. Yeah.
And then bass-wise, what are you playing?
I play many different basses. My favorite is for the Prince stuff, my favorite is the Fender Jazz bass. I have a few of them, and I have one with that's active, and I like the active for the studio because, with the preamp you can adjust your tones, but on stage, passive all the way.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of bass players, they think I'm crazy. They're like, you got to be kidding me. You play passive on stage? I play passive. And what I like to do is, and this is a really weird combination, but I play with heavy strings, and I'm endorsed by Ernie Ball. So I use an Ernie Ball Cobalt flat for the E, A, and the D string.
Mm-hmm.
G string, I use a round wound medium light gauge string. It's a weird combination, but for my style, and when you hear it, it's just like, whoa, okay, because it's the bass very pronounced. It's very the tone is deep, but then when you get the plucking on the high, it's crisp. It's light and clean. Because when I was playing with the heavier G string, I didn't like it. It was just a little too heavy, and it didn't give me that sound that I like. Especially if I'm doing chords. So what I did is I just I said, hey, who says there's rules? And I put a light string on the G, and I use heavy flats on for the E, A, and the D. So really different.
Well, and sometimes the only way that we can evolve is when people try to do new and different things. I don't know if you knew, but like Lee Sklar's bass, he uses mandolin frets instead of bass frets. And he says it takes him kind of almost that in between fretless and fretted.
Wow.
Because they're smaller.
Very cool.
And when he told me the story when he went in to have this thing built that way, and he told the guy he wanted mandolin frets, the luthier looked at him and said, "What are you, like, crazy? What?" and he told him, "No, if it doesn't work out, I'll pay you to put in the other one. So there's no risk to you.
Exactly.
But I want to try this and see." And he has stayed with that ever since.
Cool.
And so if you get one of his signature basses, I don't think they come with the mandolin frets as are, but I know his has it. So,
wow.
so it makes it unique. Any other things of your gear you'd like to talk to us about?
The other bass that I play is the Olympic Spoiler. That's
Nice.
my other bass of choice. I play that. The Fender is more for my funk and for that hard bottom. But when I get into more, finger playing and chords and things like that, I like my Olympic Spoiler, and I have a rolling kit put in it. So it's
Nice.
it's got the MIDI and the tracking built into the bass itself. And so, I had a white one with a bunch of flowers on it that's at the Paisley Museum right now. But I have a replica of it, the same. I had two built, and I keep the other one, but it's retired. I don't bring it on the road anymore. But yeah, it's an awesome bass, though. That's my other bass of choice. Love
Nice.
that.
Nice. And if people want to know more, because again, I think getting to see you guys play is a must do and certainly a treat. Where's the best place for people to look to find out if you're going to be in a town near where they're going?
If you follow us on Twitter,
Okay.
I believe there's a couple places. Our Twitter feed is The Revoultion or at Steal a Group. So there's at The Revoultion and there's at Steal a Group. Steal, STILLGROUP, or LLA, yeah, GROUP.
Yeah.
And then there's also on Facebook, we have The Revoultion official Facebook page. And then BrownMark Nation or BrownMark official fan page. Because between those two pages, we post all of our activity. And in Instagram, it's also The Revoultion.
Gotcha. Well, BrownMark, thank you so much for taking time and sharing your bass life experience with us. And it's so insightful. And I'm sure our readers will enjoy this and go, wow, now I know something I never imagined before. So that's just great. We wish you the greatest success with the upcoming tour and recordings. Make sure to keep us in the loop when that single's going to drop or something. Let us know. We'll help get the word out and let people know. It's just a great honor and pleasure chatting with you. So, folks, you're seeing it here. BrownMark, bassist for the Revoultion, on tour now, coming to a venue near you. So we'll put the ways to find it. Go see them. Tell them you saw it here on Bass Musician Magazine.